Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.
Welcome to all.
History is made of stories.
In this episode, we'll be talking about what it means to have a big picture view.
Just like theory and practice and the concrete and the abstract, people tend to see the big picture and attention to detail as opposites. So many dichotomies, they sweep all nuance under the rug.
The imperative to see the big picture often erects a wall between two worlds, the world of higher-ups and the world below, the world here and the world there.
Exactly, it can create binaries, focusing on the wall rather than the bridge. So, seeing the big picture and the importance of connections, what's the story?
Seeing the big picture is about having a comprehensive understanding of a situation. The idea is that by taking a step back, we can more easily understand the situation as a whole.
It's true that you can see further from up high. When you're lying in the grass admiring the daisies, it's hard to see the landscape.
The higher-ups and the rest of us, those who make decisions and those who execute them, those who see the big picture, understand and plan, and those who are expected to jump to action according to the framework delivered from on high.
But adopting such a condescending approach also pulls you away from reality, which, paradoxically, hinders your ability to understand it. The goal isn't to place yourself above others, it's to develop a good understanding of a real situation.
When you think about it, height and distance are too simplistic as metaphors for understanding. In companies, it feels more like a resurgence of Taylorism with its dual division of labor.
The horizontal division of the value chain and the vertical division between the people who think and assign work and the people who execute it with very little autonomy because the system implicitly assumes that they can't think for themselves.
This may even date back to a debate between reductionist versus holistic approaches.
The former considers the whole to be the sum of its parts, so you can understand anything by taking it apart. This is the principle expounded upon by Descartes in his famous discourse on method: divide each difficulty I examine into as many parts as possible and as are necessary to resolve them.
The latter approach, holism, sees the whole as an indivisible entity which is more than the sum of its parts.
We need complex organizational reasoning that studies the relationship of the whole to the behavior of the parts, wrote Ilya Prigogine and Isabelle Stengers in La Nouvelle Alliance.
A holistic vision provides an alternative to the condescending call to adopt a big picture view we mentioned before. It tells us that the whole cannot be reduced to the sum of its parts, that we have to understand the interactions between the whole and the parts that compose it as well as between the parts themselves.
This holistic vision invites us to take a closer look at the interaction between the parts to understand the whole they make up.
Especially since some of these interactions may be logical connections, and together these interactions, understood as logical connections between the parts, reveal the whole to be a form of reasoning.
So, to truly have a big picture view of a situation, to understand it fully, we may need to pay attention to the ties between subgroups, which means that the dichotomy between workers in the field and planners with vision no longer holds any sway.
An understanding of the field and the everyday reality of the company's business is an understanding of the parts. We need to pay attention to how they interact and try to understand the logical connections and the causal relationships between them to understand the whole.
Only then will we have a big picture view. You have to closely examine each of the parts and their interactions before stepping back to establish ties between them. You need both.
To recap, to develop a big picture view, you can't simply observe things from afar. You have to pay attention to the ties between them, especially logical connections, to better understand the whole they create. This understanding is what we can truly call a big picture view. Is that right?
Exactly right. Way to make a long story short.
Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.